Hi. So, in this continuing journey that I have been on with this series, we've been trying to figure what it takes for us to lead better lives in this second innings, the time after we are 50, and especially in that zone of 50 to 65 years or 70 years or so, the space that we call as the prime generation or prime years of life. Now, we've been talking about the various different facets of life which we need to address at this stage. And one of the key ones is the area of health. Now, I have spoken with my limited understanding about health, but clearly it's a subject that demands expertise, a deep expertise. And we're thankful today to have just that perfect expert sitting with us as a guest. So, on this episode of What If You Live to Be 100, please welcome Dr. Bhavin Jankharia, a very eminent radiologist, extremely well acclaimed medical practitioner. I've known him for many years as a doctor, as a friend, and I've seen different avatars of his in terms of what all he does in life. And it's an amazing, multifarious personality. For example, he's been a marathon runner for the longest of times. He has been writing non-medical aspects or non-medical topics in newspapers as well as a book. He had a very popular series called Men from Matunga, which he converted into a book. But more recently, he has also has a deep interest in exactly this space of how do we age healthfully, as he calls it. So, while the lifespan might be long enough because of medical science and various other factors, how does that extended life also remain healthy and for as long as possible? And that journey of his in terms of inquiry, in terms of figuring what it takes, led him also to convert his findings into a book called Atma Swastha. And as the name of the book goes, his clear feeling is that it's up to us. It's up to an individual to do the best with his health. And he also updates that. He's got a website for Atma Swastha, which is constantly updated with new research and new findings. It's really impressive. I'm a subscriber and I enjoy reading those articles. So, without more of an introduction, let's go and welcome Bhavin, and let's have some initial thoughts from you on this subject of how do we age better at this stage of life. Yeah.
Thanks, Sanjay. So the entire thing came about because I'm aging. I'm 61 now, and I think when I was 56-ish, maybe about 4 or 5 years ago. Yeah, it's been 5 years since I started Atmoswast. So what happened is I was looking at my life to figure out whether I am living it as healthy as possible or not. Now, you mentioned that I used to run, and I still run. I don't participate in marathons, but that's one part of being physically active. And I've, for quite some time now, been lifting weights and trying to be sensible about eating, trying to sleep well. But the question was, from a scientific data perspective, do we know what impacts us, how much that impacts us, and what is it that is very important, what is it that is important, what is it that is not so important,
Right.
and stuff like that. So I think in December 25, I started the site, I started looking at the data, and then every week or 2 weeks, I would write an article which after about 2 years morphed into the 15-point guide to live long healthy, because then I had pretty much covered a whole bunch of points, everything from how air pollution or heat affects our health and what we should be doing, but in the end coming down to actionable points. So every
Right.
piece that I write ends with, so what does this mean for you
Right.
and me? Because we need to then understand what that translates into something we can do. So once in a while, I'll write an article which is only to understand the landscape where there's no other action required. But the vast majority will be, maybe this is what we should be doing at the bare minimum, and then anything else that we do is extra. So that translates into the lifespan, health span concept that you
Right.
spoke about, that statistically all of us are pretty much going to live till we're 90. I think that's like a given. Obviously, not everyone will. Some people will have an accident, some will have some cancers, heart attacks, strokes, etc. But the vast majority will pull through.
Right.
Now, the pulling through is fine, but you need to be independent. You need to not be at the mercy of your children, your relatives, or society at large. You don't want to be in a assisted care facility where you're dependent on others to take care of your daily needs. So you need to be healthy during that lifespan. We don't want to be, we've all had relatives who just do nothing but lie in bed. So they also live or have lived till 1995, but for the last 20 years, they were just a burden that you carried
Right.
all your life. Now, you don't want to be like that, which means you need a longer health span
Right.
or a contracted disease span. So if you're going to live till 90, maybe all the major diseases should come only after 85
Yeah.
and get contracted in those 5 years, but you lead a very healthy life till about 85.
Right.
So that long health span within a long lifespan
Right.
is what you need. Now, that effect, so while diseases that occur can be treated if they occur, the issue is how do you prevent diseases from occurring in the first place? So, what is it that you can do to prevent a disease from occurring, or perhaps picking up a disease as early as possible so you can nip it in the bud?
Right.
Now, picking up disease early, nipping it in the bud is what almost all preventive healthcare is focused on, right? When you go for a health checkup, you try and find disease. So, you're a normal human being, and we're trying to make ourselves into patients by finding disease,
Right.
which is right. It's one part, but that the bigger part is how do you prevent the disease from occurring in the first place?
Right.
What can you do to do that? And that is the whole journey that I've been writing about.
Nice, nice. So I think this is a very relevant point that all of us are constantly bombarded on our, social media feeds, Instagram, and everything about the many things that one would people want us to do in terms of health, and within all that confusion that one normally experiences because we don't know which is the thing to do, which is not the thing to do. Your 15-point guide is actually like a very specific 15 points, and you're almost saying that don't worry about a lot of other things which are unnecessary, right? So we'll come to that. But I have a more fundamental question. You, for example, had always been running even in your younger days. So by the time you were 50, you probably were among the fitter people. Some of us are not. We can't undo, the ills of the past. I mean, we should have taken better care of ourselves earlier. And if one is at that 55, 60, 60 odd kind of a point of time in life with varying levels of health conditioning at this point, is there still hope for us? Like, what would you say that what is it that we can still do, assuming there are different levels of health one has?
Yeah, I think everything is changeable with time. So you can't get up at the age of 60 with a bunch of issues and say that in 3 months I want to look like Milind Soman or something like that. It's not going to happen.
Right.
But realistically, at any age, when you start changing things, it makes a difference. And in fact, there was one piece I had written exactly on this where they tracked a bunch of people who, let's say, started becoming physically active only at the age of 70. And they found that as long as you started and didn't stop, you started doing better than everybody else who was not physically active. So
Right.
it didn't matter what age you started,
Right.
you just need to
Right.
start and not stop.
Right.
And in that, somewhere it's people will talk about 10,000 steps, people will talk about, running, working out, ripped bodies, all of that. But what we really need to do is, so humans were not designed to be sedentary. I think if we go back 100,000 years and the way we've evolved, all of this sedentariness is really a 200, 300-year problem. So on the one hand, people up to the 1800s, the average lifespan across the world was about 40 years. In India was about 30 years. Irrespective of what we do, we're living, because there's been so much improvement in sanitation. The big ticket
Yeah.
items, good food, clothing, shelter,
Yeah.
good sanitation, antibiotics, reasonably good healthcare, vaccines, all of that has suddenly come together, and we're just living long.
Right.
So you could argue and say that anyway, now we're living long, why should we, the sedentary
Yeah.
lifestyle shouldn't make a difference. But the challenge is that it's the health span bit. You will
Yeah.
live long, but you will live a diseased life.
Absolutely.
So something like physical activity, there's so much nonsense that you will, as you write, get in your WhatsApp groups and Instas and stuff like that. But there is research, and it's non-tainted research, because nobody is pushing a product or so the analogy is, if you have a drug, even if you have an article in our leading journals like the New England Journal or the Lancet, where the drug is talked about, saying that, okay, this makes a difference, there is always at the back of your mind a little thing saying that, oh, but the pharma company has sponsored it, so have they to some extent influenced the
Yeah.
results? And though the editors and the peer reviewers will do everything possible to make sure that doesn't happen, you still don't know until many years have passed.
Yeah.
And then the drug becomes generic, and then other people do trials without the pharma companies there.
Right.
Now, with physical activity, there is no one who gains. I mean,
Yeah.
you could say that the athletic companies maybe gain, like Nike and Lululemon and Athletica, but they're not sponsoring any of these. So
Yeah.
you have researchers sitting in universities looking at people over 10 years, 20 years, tracking their physical activity. Initially, it was with questionnaires, where you could always argue that the questionnaires, people may, themselves over or under talk about what
Yeah.
they're doing. Now they use accelerometers, your
Yeah. Yeah.
Apple Watches, Fitbits. And the first accelerometers in research started in 2013. So
Okay.
we've got data now over 10, 15
Right.
years. And now it's all boiling down to what is the bare minimum that you need to do. So the bare minimum is literally 5 minutes of moderate to vigorous physical activity. So brisk walking of 5 minutes versus somebody who doesn't every day changes your risk profile by 50% as compared to somebody who doesn't,
Right.
which may not be saying much, because if somebody who doesn't is going to fall sick in 5 years and you're going to fall sick in 7 or 8 years, that's not such a big deal,
Yeah.
right? But then you add on, and if you are doing 40, so it's just 4,000 steps a day, which is 3.2 to 3.5 kilometers, but depending on your speed of walking is 35 to 40 minutes a day, 6 days a week. If you do that, you've pretty much taken care of one third of your health problems. That's it.
Right.
You add to that by doing more, by then focusing on cardiorespiratory fitness, looking at your VO2 max. You don't have to do that, but if you do want to, or you start lifting, because you should add a little bit of strength training, that just changes everything.
Right.
Your risk profiles, everything, it works
Gone.
out. The second piece is food. But food is where all your influencers and everyone can play around with your mind, because, the data and the science is also not very good. Most of it is sponsored by food companies. It's difficult. So
Yeah.
you have to do what is called sensible eating. Keep your calorie count at whatever is your standard level. Eat a little bit of everything. Try and not eat ultra processed foods, but you can't avoid that.
Yeah.
Just keep it to a minimum. I mean, do whatever you have to, but you don't want to do a Doritos or a Lay's packet every day,
Right.
things like that. Sleep, again, if you read Matthew Walker's book, he'll tell you everything boils down to sleep,
Wow.
which is not right. I mean, and so you need sleep. You need 6 to 8 hours of sleep. You don't want to do less, you don't want to do more.
Yeah.
But if you can do that, then you're good.
Right.
And if you can't, then you need help, then you should get that help.
Got
You know, you so in the end, what is it that we don't want? We don't want a heart attack. We don't want a stroke. We don't want to fall fracture and die prematurely. We don't want a cancer, and we don't want to prematurely get dementia or get cognitively disabled. Pretty much the big
Yeah.
five questions.
Right. Right.
Physical activity takes care of all five. Sensible eating, sleep takes care of a bunch of these things. Uh, Cardiovascular risk assessment matters. Again, you have the big things there. Make sure your blood pressure is under control. You must measure that. Make sure your blood sugar is under control. Make sure your lipid levels are under control. You take care of these three big things, your cardiovascular risk is reasonably taken care of.
Right.
Cancers, there are very few cancers you can detect that where we have enough data that detecting them early makes a difference. So you do those things like mammography, HPV DNA for women, a couple of other things like that, and that's about it. But not falling. I mean, if you think you're going to fall, you need to make sure that you are conscious enough not to fall. Now, for example, while the kids are looking at their phones while walking, when I'm out running, I see that even now people over 60, 70, idiots that they are looking at their phones down and walking.
Right.
You can't do that. That's a recipe for disaster.
Absolutely.
Somewhere you're going to stumble and fall.
Absolutely.
You fall, you fracture. You fracture, your health span is already gone for a toss, and from there it's only downhill.
Wow. Yeah.
So it's even those things that matter. It's not everything. Not about medicine. It's also about the way you lead your life. The making sure that or for example, let's say that there's a heat wave going on, and you need to structure your life for your day in such a way that you're indoors in a cool environment, not out at 2 in the afternoon, getting that sun, because when you're exposed to heat, all your other illnesses can quickly emerge and create problems.
Right. Right.
Or extreme cold for that matter.
Right.
Or when the AQI is 500 or 400, you need to make sure that you have you're in an environment where your windows are shut, where you have air purifiers in. When you go out, masks may or may not help, but keep the outdoors as little as possible. All of those things.
Right.
It's everything that
Yeah,
matters.
yeah.
Or getting your influenza vaccine, or getting your pneumococcal vaccine. If you get a scratch, making sure you get your tetanus thing sorted out. All of those things. So
Got it. So many interesting points made in this answer. So at the outset, I feel that when Bhavin says that 5 minute brisk workout or something is better than nothing. I mean, it can, as small as that, can help. Of course, I'm not taking it myself, nor would I advise that stay only till 5 minutes. Like you said, something like a 4,000 steps or something, if we can get to that as a rhythm, it can help a lot. So one is that small bits, wherever, whatever age we are ready and we get started, it's only going to help. But the few other interesting things that I heard is, first of all, when you break it down to those 4 5 key areas, right? Whether it's cardiovascular, or fearing a heart issue or a stroke, or falls or cancer. I mean, essentially there are these 4 5 big ones, and is there something that we can do about it consciously? I think it's just to get it into our conscious mind that there are a few things that we can do, and then just be alert to it across the day. I think can be a great start. So that was other thing that I could kind of get from this. And the other point that, as an example he makes, that if you get a fracture, I mean, if you fall, if you don't take care, and for whatever reason, one could be accidents, but if it happens because you were looking at your phone and walking on a cobbled footpath, and you fall and then you get a fracture, you think it's just that one event. But what Bhavin makes the bigger point is that on account of that fracture, while you will recover from that, there is a health span impact, for the rest of your life, and which we may not understand. We might think of it as an isolated incident. So thinking that little deeper is really important. I mean, I take that as a very key message here. You mentioned about a few things that are necessary or worth measuring, like blood pressure, blood sugar, etc. And on the other hand, earlier you mentioned that when you go for checking out whether you have disease or not, you're kind of sort of probably inviting or asking, is there something like an overdoing some of these, because
Yes.
there is also a tendency these days to do so. What would you think are worth checking at certain frequency, and what one may be unnecessary or excessive, if you want to sort of demystify that for our listeners.
So I think on a yearly basis, if you can, and you don't have to do everything at the same time. So one of the things that happens is people will go in for an executive health checkup, spend half a day, get up, and often they'll just tell the hospital or the center to do everything that is possible. So let me actually go on a tangent. So there is a blood test which picks up a bunch of cancers, or the possibility that you have a cancer. It has become quite popular abroad, and even in some people in India have managed to get those tests done, though it's not available here. Now, if you find that it gives you a signal that you have a cancer, then you have to get a whole body MR, a PET CT, or something done to find that cancer. It has its false positives, it has its false negatives. So there's a chance you may not have a cancer. There's a chance, and the test was positive, but it was false positive. And of course, if the test is negative, doesn't mean you're not going to develop a cancer or there isn't something lingering inside. The promotional material and the usage of the test went faster than the randomized control trials, because you need to prove, intuitively it's, oh great, we'll do a test, we'll find the cancer, but it doesn't work like that, because no test is 100% effective and accurate. Just day before yesterday, the first RCT done in the NHS, where they looked at a large number of people over 3 years to see if the test makes a difference in finding cancers in stage 3 and stage 4, they've realized it doesn't help, which means it's a useless test.
Wow.
And if it is a useless test, then it brings with its, a whole lot of problems. So intuitively, it seems great, but it's not. So there are some health checkups where they'll tell you choose one MRI of your body. So somebody will say, I want an MRI of the spine done or the brain done. But why would you do an MRI of a region that doesn't cause you problems? Because you'll always find something. So there was another study that came out of Sweden just 2 weeks ago, and I have to write about that, is where they did an MRI of the shoulders. They used the opposite shoulder as comparison for somebody who was symptomatic in this shoulder, just to find out what do you see here. And they found that more than half the people have some problem of the rotator cuff that will show up on an MRI that you do. So then what's the point doing an MR?
Right.
You will always find something. You can't unsee the results of an MR. Then you'll worry, oh, I have a tear here, I have some capsulitis. But you're going to get it. As you age, there is wear and tear of your body parts. So coming back to this, the whole point is, therefore, do what is essential and necessary, but don't do something that is not required. So in that, it's a physical examination. You need somebody to examine you once a year, just to look for lumps and bumps. You need to measure your blood pressure, check blood sugar, check your lipid levels. It may be more frequent if they are not fully normal, but at least once a year is what you need to do. And then A chest X-ray would be once every 3 to 4 years. This is a very Indian thing because TB is still endemic in our country. It makes sense to, because a lot of us can be asymptomatic carriers of tuberculosis, so you need to get that done. And then a mammography every year or once in 2 years, a bone density just once in your life for a woman above the age of 60, as if you're, from an asymptomatic
Right.
perspective. When we're doing these health checkups, we're assuming that you're going in as a person, not as a patient, where
Right.
you just want to make sure there's no major big
Yeah.
disease happening. Then an HPV DNA for CA cervix that you do once every 5 years, things like that. Then there are some where you have to understand the implications of the results and be very careful about doing it. One of them is the serum PSA, which picks up cancer of the prostate. Now, if you get it done after the age of 70, let's say, there is a and you find a cancer, the question that remains is that cancer the one that is going to kill you, or is it one of that 30% of cancers that have been shown in postmortem studies to just be there and they just continue to linger and will never kill you?
Oh, okay.
So when they've looked at autopsy studies in patients over 80, they found half of them have cancer foci in the prostate,
Okay.
which, big deal. So but the PSA may be high. Now, is your cancer that one or not? So do you get yourself treated or not? Now there is this whole concept of active surveillance where they say that don't do anything. Wait for 3 months, 6 months, just do an MR. If it starts growing, we'll remove it. If not, not. In India, the concept of active surveillance doesn't exist. You tell a patient you have a cancer, but why don't we wait? Doesn't work. Everybody wants it out.
Right.
But there are harms to the treatment. There is
Okay.
no good treatment,
Okay.
right? Everything there's pain, you can have issues with erections, you have issues with infection, you have issues with urination. It is not a straightforward and simple surgery that you could get done and get it out, because there are side effects. So the
Right.
point is, was it worth doing the serum PSA
Right.
just to find a cancer that perhaps would not have affected you at all?
Got it.
And it also depends on your risk appetite. If you're the kind of person, I just want to find everything and get everything out of the way, then you do it, deal with get that cancer out, deal with its complications, etc. But somebody like me will say, no, I don't want to do it. And so I will never get my serum PSA done. That's how it is.
Yeah.
So these are issues that no doctor has the time to talk to you
Right,
about.
right.
I mean, you can't get into this conversation. It's very difficult. So you have to figure it out for yourself.
Got
That
it.
do I want to do this? Do I not want to do this? Do a little bit of reading. Where on my site I've done a bunch of that, but you can use that as a sounding board. Check with the AI. So instead of Googling things, if you ask really well prompted questions to ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, telling them that, consider yourself to be a doctor. I am 60 years old. I need to get a serum PSA done. Should I get it done? What are the pros and cons? It will try and give you that information. So you could use, at least right now, the AI doesn't give you false information most of the time.
Right.
Googling does, because you get taken to links that will,
Yeah.
are often fraudulent. So these are the few things you have to do for sure. And the rest of the times, it's just doing things to prevent problems from happening.
Right.
That's where it
Got it.
comes down to.
So like you talked about people who want to just get it out and all. I mean, there is this whole, like, I'm sure we all know about this whole set of people who are sort of biohackers, and they want to, just because now everything can be measured, they want to
Correct.
measure,
Correct.
and then they want to
Like
tweak.
Brian Wilson.
Yeah, and then everything they want to tweak it to this finest level. I mean, is it even worth thinking about? I mean,
No data, nothing. These are rich white people, I'm sorry. And the rich white clan, while I use white, it's not from a racist perspective. There are enough of these rich brown in India, but who behave like they're white from a mentality perspective, who are doing the same. And so it is everything from wearing aura rings to, and I'm sorry, I've named a brand, but comes to the whole thing. Constantly are monitoring, or those CGMs that you put. you are diabetic, you use a CGM to monitor things, great. You have a disease for which you're using it. If you're normal, then why would you want a CGM to flatten your curves when that's the physiology, right? When you eat and things change, that's normal physiology. You don't want to tamper with that simply because somebody told you that on the CGM you should monitor and make sure everything is not going too much up and down, which is great if you're diabetic, not if you're not a diabetic. So unfortunately, the techies, and it's most of this comes from techies,
Yeah.
right? Engineers
Yeah.
who believe 1+1 is equal to 2. In medicine, 1+1 is not equal to 2 because every body is different. Every individual is different. Every individual's response to drugs and treatment and anything that you take is different. And so you cannot predict, and when you can't, it's very difficult. So
Yeah.
you don't, I mean, those supplements that people talk about, every year, every 2 years there's a new fad. None of that works. I mean, it just makes you feel nice, and often people will say, but if it doesn't harm you, then why bother? But when you take supplements, you're putting things in your body, you don't know what they will cause to your body.
Right.
So you ideally, apart from vitamin B12 and D, that too only if you're deficient. None of the others make a difference. But then somebody will say, oh, but we should be taking manganese or magnesium, or we should be taking, this mineral, and it's all pointless. And you're diverting yourself. So there's this false sense of security that develops, right? You're doing all of these biohacking things, and you believe, therefore, that nothing will happen to you. If you're also, so a lot of these rich white people and brown people, who the techies who do it, are also very physically active.
Yeah.
They're also eating sensibly.
Right.
They're also sleeping well.
Right.
You take those things, that's what's making the difference. Everything else is just noise.
Right,
But if
right.
you focus on the noise and say, you know what, I'm going to be measuring my blood levels, I'm going to be doing these supplements, you're taking away from, and you're not physically active. You say, okay, I'm not going to go to the gym every day. I'm not going to walk and run every day. Then you're missing the big picture. They're already doing that.
Right.
Which is what is keeping them healthy. They're taking all the vaccines. They're making sure they don't fall. They are taking care of their blood pressure, blood sugar, and all of that.
Absolutely.
So you focus on that. Don't focus on
Right.
the other stuff.
Right. Right. Got it. So, in the context of, you mentioned AI, and like earlier, I mean, I used to hear doctors say that a patient walks in and says, "Google mein ye pada hai," and this and that, So it's like today that's become AI instead of Google. While you actually mentioned that's a good situation as an idea to do, so much depends on how you put the prompt in
Absolutely.
the first place. And then do you just take it, like, given this as a general guidance, is there a risk that somebody will just follow it blindly and it might not be the right one? I mean, it's something which has to be used very
very carefully. In the
carefully.
sense, the AI question answer session that you have once you start prompting has to be based on something else before, where you just want a couple of queries sorted out and answer.
Right.
So when I mentioned serum PSA, the start should be an article like mine or a peer-reviewed article. All the ones in the last 5 years talk about the same thing. Be careful what you wish for, and they'll give you data and all of that. Then you could actually take those PDFs and put them into the AI and say, pass this for us, for me in normal lay language,
Right.
and ask them to explain what it means.
Right.
So you can't just write a prompt saying, tell me 15 things to stay healthy, and then out of there is no context that the AI has. Even if you say that I'm a 60-year-old Indian living in Mumbai, India, and this is what I do, these are my habits, and then ask it to do it for you, that's not going to work.
Right.
So but it's great for focused questions and answers. And I've started telling my patients that. So, the other day, I was doing a biopsy, they had some query about seeding. And I said, obviously, it was WhatsApp or Insta. They said, no, we Googled and followed a couple of links. I said, all you had to do is ask the same question to ChatGPT or Claude or
Yeah.
Gemini, and they would have given you a more nuanced answer,
Right.
which you could have read. So if you are intelligent enough and educated enough to do that with Google, then you do that now with the AIs.
Got it.
At least they have, by and large, the answers they give are based on the data and the
Got it.
science that is there. So they're helpful as of now, but the right context.
Yeah. Yeah. So one other question, is like we spoke about earlier, that there's just so much material which keeps showing up, and even if one is proactively looking for something, because you're exploring whether it's serum PSA or anything else, one is exploring and finds stuff. I mean, to figure which one to trust and which one to not, right? And as obviously as a expert, as a doctor, you have over the years, whatever, your trusted sources, etc. As individuals, we might not be able to sort of differentiate. Of course, just to let the viewers know, when I follow Bhavin's writings, and whenever any new newsletter or article comes, it is always supported with a bunch of links from where the original research or original reference material is, and those are the reliable ones. Now, everything that you read doesn't come with those kinds of references. So, for common people, what is a way? I mean, like, is there any way at all? Like, how do you
I,
trust? Is there?
it's difficult. So I know, for example, there's one influencer who was a management graduate who then started calling herself a doctor
Oh wow.
and became a health coach, health expert, has started treating some high profile celebrities with a whole bunch of testimonials. Then, when she was called out, saying that, but you have absolutely no domain knowledge, you're just taking things from here, there, putting it together using marketing jargon and doing the. She went and got some degree from Ireland that allowed her to use the doctor
Okay.
tag, so that now when anybody approaches, she's, oh, but I am a doctor. But again, no domain knowledge. There is absolutely nothing.
Right.
She is trusted by a bunch of people. So how do you know as a layperson whether this person should be trusted or not? I don't have an answer.
Right.
Because even doctors sometimes, when it's not, so one of the things I'm extremely conscious about is the issue of epistemic trespassing, right? So my domain is radiology. Um, and anything within that, I don't think there's any issue. And it comes to radiology, it's not as if there are others who are trying to pass themselves off as radiologists. So there isn't anybody else that you're going to get conned by or have to worry about whether this person is
Yeah.
genuine or not. But when it comes to health at large, I have used my medical and radiology knowledge and my so called writing skills to put these together as something for me that I'm then sharing with. So, one of the other things I do is I don't have a list on WhatsApp that I send my links to. I am not forcing myself on anybody. I refuse to do that. A lot of people will say, just create a list, and I get those as well. There are other writers who write on health and other things who just put me on a list and will send me every week what they do. But you're pushing things in people's face.
Yeah.
What you want is for them to find you, then trust you, in which case the trust is
Right.
more real, right?
Absolutely.
If you're pushing things, so I'll put up stuff on Insta and on my website, but it's for you to find.
Yeah.
And if you have subscribed to me on the mailing list and you get an email, it's because you chose to do
Yeah.
that. And so
Absolutely.
that's one way of doing it.
Absolutely.
But coming back to the epistemic trespassing, every time I write about all this stuff, which is non radiology, the reason I give the references is because I'm also saying I'm not an expert. I understand the science, I understand the implications, and my job is to translate the science in lay language for you
Right.
and give you actionable points based on that, because you're never going to have the time, energy, and the domain knowledge to do all this. I'm
Absolutely.
doing it for you. Because I'm doing it for myself, I'm also
Right. Right.
sharing it out.
Right.
But if I were to give advisory on treatment, for example, or even the vitamin D thing, before I said that you don't need supplementation, I spoke to my endocrinology friends and I've mentioned it there, saying what I'm writing. Tell me whether I should do this or not. And they actually caught out a couple of my words that I was using, made me change it, say
Right.
this is not appropriate. I have the ability to do that, which a lot of people wouldn't. I can reach out to any expert in the country, say who I am, and they will talk to me. I have at least that much
Yeah.
I'm able to do. But giving advice on domains that you are not an expert in, it's the same thing. You have a stock market guru who runs a stock marketing company, which is very, very well regarded, now starts giving health advice. I mean, what the hell? You can talk about your journey, right?
Yeah.
You had an incident, you had these problems, this is what you did. But then to turn around and say that this is what you should do, you don't know.
Right.
You can't turn around and say you don't have any domain knowledge here, but
Yeah.
people will follow him
Correct.
because people assume that if you're a Nobel Prize winner in chemistry, you can talk about politics and you're considered a similar expert. Or you're the best cricketer. Though I must admire Sachin Tendulkar there, right? He You ask him on cricket, every time somebody asks him about something else, he just turns around and says, I'm not an expert, don't ask me.
Right.
And that's how it should be. But people
Exactly.
they turn around and say, oh, we know everything about everything because we did this. So coming back to that, when you have people giving gyan, I think you just need to figure out who they are and where they come from and
Right.
what
Right.
knowledge they have, and then try and understand that and then take it from there. But seriously, if the person is an expert in another field, unless there is a complete change in what they are doing, you can't take,
Absolutely.
or I know I'm going on a rant here, but you have runners, for example, right? There was this couple, they changed their lives, they wrote a book, very, very good. And they talk about running and the benefits. Brilliant. You're running, you're a marathoner. You know you did this, you talk about it. But then suddenly you branch out into other parts of health and health care. But you are not a doctor. You don't know anything else.
Right.
Or yoga teachers who move from yoga into everything
Right.
else, right?
Yeah.
It's difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
No, I think like you mentioned, it's a rant of sorts, but I think it's also important that, especially for a subject as critical and as sensitive as health, the last thing any of us wants to do is to get carried away by some influencer with not the right kind of background, not the right credentials or authority to be talking on the subject. So, we are in a world of social media and Instagram and YouTube and all that, and all of this is going to keep coming in front of us all the time. Uh, we may, choose to take a view of somebody who's not an expert to go and watch a film. It doesn't matter. It has very little implication. But when it comes to health, I think it's really important what Bhavin has just shared, to trust reliable, authentic sources only and not just digress. I think it's going to be a lot to do with our personal discipline on this. It's these things will keep coming up. These will look genuine, especially in these days of phishing and whatnot. It's really up to us to be very clear about which is the one to consider and the rest to just let them be, right?
but I love your film analogy. So it exactly says what the issue is. So with a film, it's about opinions.
Yeah.
And somebody may love a movie. Let's take Durandar, for example. Polarized views, all of that. And some reviewers who you normally follow didn't like it. By the way, I did like the movie, and then there are others who said it's a brilliant movie, but that's an opinion.
Yeah.
Now, when it comes to health, if the opinions are not based on a bedrock of science,
Yeah.
then it is irrelevant.
Absolutely.
And we saw that during COVID, when people without information, even highly acclaimed doctors, because we didn't have, in the first year, we didn't know.
Yeah.
So people just made opinions based on what they thought was right.
Right.
But there was no science
Yeah.
behind any of that. And we
Correct.
saw that there also the smartest doctors and researchers screwed up,
Yeah.
right? Because you didn't have the knowledge, but you still wanted to give an opinion.
Yeah.
So I think the issue is of differentiating an opinion from a message based on the data that is existing. And I think that really makes the difference.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so.
So we've had a good conversation. We're almost done. But since you mentioned polarized, I'm going to ask a question on a subject where we see polarization. And I know you have a view on it. So I'm going to ask you about it for the benefit of our listeners. It's on the GLP-1 space, right? I think one of the areas, which you mentioned earlier in terms of potential cause of death or early death is about diabetes and hypertension and some of the cardiac issues, and GLP-1 or the Ozempics of the world are supposedly the answers, and that's where polarization is happening. Some people will say no, it's got so much damage, and some agree on it. So what's the view? And the reason I'm asking Bhavin is, as you've seen right through this conversation, that he calls a spade a spade. He doesn't necessarily, I mean, it's a conviction, it's a personal conviction, and he doesn't mind sharing his conviction. People would have often tended to be sort of on the fence and on some of these issues. So what's the view on
Okay,
this?
so this one has to be more nuanced, unfortunately, because the data is only 5 years old. And based on the current data, I will tell you what it is. But the polarization, unfortunately, so if people are polarized, that's fine. You decide whether you want to take it or you don't want to take it. Unfortunately, doctors are
Yeah,
polarized. And
exactly.
especially in India, where you go to somebody, most of them will say, cha cha cha, you go and do physical activity, you do this, you do that. So let's spend time on this, right? So there are medical hardcore indications for taking the GLP-1s, and then there are the softer indications. Let's say that you have bad diabetes, you are on insulin, even then it's plus minus, then there's no argument. These drugs make a difference. That's what they are here for. They will help you control your diabetes. You should be on that, because it not only will you lose weight, there is the additional benefit over and above the weight loss of your blood sugar and HbA1c control. So no argument there. Though when you go to the diabetologist, they will still say you do this, you do this, you do this, then go to GLP-1. Where one argument is, since we don't know the long-term effects, maybe they're trying to be conservative, fair enough. But if it's required, you should be prescribing. The second is obesity. And I think Lilly has done this wonderful campaign around using Kaun Banega Crorepati as their thing. They're saying obesity is a disease, and you're reframing it as a disease, in which case then you need to treat the disease, and therefore the treatment is giving Munjaro or Ozempic or whatever. And I think while that's the whole marketing thing that they're doing, the point is, and it's happened to friends of mine, right? There is this friend whose wife is a little obese. She has knee pain. Every time they go to a doctor, the doctor says, I won't look at your knees until you lose weight. And she says, but what extra am I supposed to do? I hardly eat. I can't exercise because my knees pain. So it's a vicious cycle. And finally, she went on Munjaro, and everything has changed, right? The knee pains have gone. You're able to walk more. It's breaking the vicious cycle. You're able to control your food better, and you're losing weight, but it makes you feel good. Now, how long do you take it? What are the long term effects? My point is, if I am taking statins or antihypertensives for life, fine, we'll take this for life. Maybe 10 years later, we'll know more about what's happening in terms of side effects, but there don't seem to be any major side effects happening. If it works for you, why not? That's my philosophy. But coming to the softer things, right? You are going for a wedding, you just want to fit into a slimmer dress. You then take the GLP-1. Everyone's doing it now, right? Um, uh, those softer indications. I am not a treating doctor. Nobody asks me where to prescribe or whatever. But I'm in that situation. I'm like, if it works for you and if you're taking a conscious reasoned decision to do it, go for it. It's the same PSA testing thing. You should know what you're doing.
Right.
If you are well informed, do your research, then do whatever you want in life.
Right.
That's fine. Right? Even with the Brian Wilson analogy. You truly believe your research that you've done that these supplements are going to help, do it for yourself. Just don't try and convince others to do it.
Yeah.
What you do with yourself is based on the information you have is your business.
Right.
None of us is going to, interfere with that. But don't thrust it on others unless you're a domain expert, is where I'm coming from.
Right.
So with the GLP-1s, and again, going on a little bit of a tangent, the way I look at it is the data is real. They work because they were never they were not created for weight loss. They were created as anti-diabetic medications. The whole weight loss thing and the other benefits came tangential. So even when the papers were being written up initially, they weren't written up. So you can't even say they were tainted because it's all just happened like this. And then you have the data and you've got some solid science behind the fact that they help you with your fatty livers, they help you with inflammatory properties. If you have osteoarthritis of the knees, what they would do is not only reduce the weight and help you with your knees, they actually have anti-inflammatory properties in the knees over and above the weight loss. Now, if these are additional things that help you, if they work for you, then they are worth exploring.
Right.
And I'm a proponent of the fact that anything that makes you pain-free, anything that allows you to lead a better than normal life, is worth the effort. Just conscious of the fact that we don't have long-term data beyond 5 years, and so make sure you're abreast of the research,
Right.
and just cognizant of the fact that there could be issues in the future, but that's life.
Fabulous. Great. Super. So that was very clear. As they say in the restaurant business, the owner of the restaurant eats here. So as Bhavin said, that all of his exploration into this zone of Atmaswastha is firstly for himself. So whatever he's sharing, I suspect, I quite believe that he is also, leading it for himself and then he's sharing.
Most of it, 85, 90%, yes.
So which
So
gives,
I'll give you an example of where sometimes I go against the flow. So if the AQI is 200, right, or if the dew point is 24, which is your wet bulb temperature, you are not supposed to be outside running. But if it's my run day, then I will take a conscious call to still run, but do less. Is that backed by data? We don't have hard data to say that when you have this and you're running with an AQ of 200, long term, this is what will happen to you. So my call is that if I can reduce the impact, because running is still giving me benefits. Yes, running in an AQ of 200 is maybe a little harmful. When the wet bulb is 24, I'm losing water, etc. So I'm going to go home and hydrate even more and take care of my electrolytes. So consciously I'm managing to do that. But my recommendation would be, do not run when the AQI is above 200, 250, and do not run when the wet bulb is above 25, 26. But there again, if you understand the concept behind what I have said, then you can take a more nuanced approach. So some of these are also meant for the fact that these are guideline based, but the data may not be very strong.
Right,
So
right.
that's about it.
Absolutely. So, in fact, as he says, we in other episodes, and even at the Ananta Quest event that some of you might be familiar with, one of the thought was that what does it mean to be wealthy or rich or whatever? It's not a number. It is the fact that we have choice in life today. So if we have a choice to not step out in the sun, if you were working in, you were a salesman and you had to make those calls, you could have not avoided it. Likewise, Bhavin was talking about taking an afternoon nap. I mean, today, if you have a choice because your day is under your control, you do that, right? So that's an exciting part about being at this phase of life.
Yeah,
You
and I
know,
think that needs to be made very clear that everything that I'm saying is for people above the age of 50, 55 who have some control of their time,
exactly.
who are reasonably well off and are reasonably well educated, etc. You can't translate the same everything that I'm saying to a 35-year-old laborer on the street. I mean, there is
Absolutely.
no connect. This
Yeah.
is meant for the audience that is, as we used to say, PLUs, people like us.
Yeah.
um, and it may sound a little classist or whatever, but the fact is we live in the environment we live in. And so for me, I know my socio-cultural economic environment and I write for that
Yeah.
environment. I am not qualified to write about somebody else who is not part of the same milieu. So
Absolutely.
please, when you hear this, and I'm assuming when you're hearing this or viewing this, you come from the same milieu. There are
Yeah.
gradations to it, but it's still the same
Yeah.
larger, the 15% of India's population that is able to do all of this. So
Yeah.
let's get that context very correct.
No, no, absolutely. I think it's the fact that I think the audience of What If You Live to Be 100 is pretty much of that kind. And in Ananta Quest, especially, that was definitely the audience that we were talking to. And not because of anything else, but we can't be everything to everyone.
Exactly.
So we decide to choose a certain space where we are communicating and, trying to be of some help. And this is in the same context and same continuation. So, yes, absolutely, it is for those of us who have a choice to, not step out in the sun or, maybe take an afternoon nap and other such things, right? So, make those choices. And by the way, I've been mentioning Ananta Quest. This is a series in what we call What If You Live to Be 100. Some of you would know that we have another activity called Ananta Quest, and Dr. Bhavin Jankharia happens to be on the board of advisors for that, and he was also one of the key speakers at our first launch event in December, and it was a fabulous talk there as well. So as we conclude, with your permission, as a part of this, as a part of the description or the notes on this episode, I can share the 15-point guide
Yes.
and also links to your book as well as
Sure.
the
That would be
website,
nice.
because that would be extremely useful in terms of continuing understandings. We didn't really get into what those 15 points are and all, because it's written, it's documented, it was spoken about, and he has spoken about in his other blogs. So this was more of a free flowing discussion, but I would highly recommend you to take a look. Very, very simple points which one can manage without compromising the lifestyle too much. I think the challenge with most of the health doctrines that we sometimes get, from wherever, is that they expect you to do so much change in life that they are designed to fail. And I've been through it enough number of times with those. So this is a reasonably doable set. And the book is very interesting, the way that it is actually, the book itself is designed so you can track and you can make your notes and all. It's not a typical just read kind of textbook. So, those who, if you are interested, do go ahead and get a copy for yourself. It would be very relevant and useful. So, with those words, I thank you again,
Thank
Bhavin,
you
for
so
spending the
much.
time and having a
Thank
very
you.
interesting discussion. I'm sure our viewers are going to find it very useful and
No, no,
relevant. So,
great fun.
thanks again.
I always like to talk, so it's
Yeah.
fine.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for listening.
See you
Yeah.
in the next episode.